solitary outlaw, but he became the friend of birds and beasts, and they aided him, and did not betray him, and from that time forth he ate no flesh, nor slew any living thing that was not in the service of Morgoth. He did not fear death, but only captivity, and being bold and desperate, he escaped both death and bonds. And the deeds of lonely daring that he achieved were noised abroad throughout Beleriand, and the tale of them came even into Doriath. At length Morgoth set a price upon his head, no less than the price upon the head of Fingon, High King of the Noldor. But the orcs fled rather at the rumor of his approach than sought him out. Therefore an army was sent against him under the command of Sauron, and Sauron brought werewolves, fell beasts inhabited by dreadful spirits that he had imprisoned in their bodies. All that land was now become filled with evil, and all clean things were departing from it. And Beren was pressed so hard that at last he was forced to flee from Dorthonion. In time of winter and snow he forsook the land and grave of his father, and climbing into the high regions of Gorgoroth, the mountains of Terror, he descried afar the land of Doriath. There it was put into his heart that he would go down into the hidden kingdom, where no mortal foot had yet trodden. Terrible was his southward journey. Sheer were the precipices of Ered Gorgoroth, and beneath their feet were shadows that were laid before the rising of the moon. Beyond lay the wilderness of Dun Gorthep, where the sorcery of Sauron and the power of Melian came together, and horror and madness walked. There spiders of the fell race of Ungoliant abode, spinning their unseen webs in which all living things were snared, and monsters wandered there that were born in the long dark before the sun, hunting silently with many eyes. No food for elves or men was there in that haunted land, but death only. That journey is not accounted least among the great deeds of Beren, but he spoke of it to no one after, lest the horror return into his mind. And none know how he found a way, and so came by paths that no man nor elf else ever dared to tread to the borders of Doriath. And he passed through the mazes that Melian wove about the kingdom of Thingol, even as she had foretold, for a great doom lay upon him. It is told in the Lay of Leithian that Beren came stumbling into Doriath grey and bowed, as with many years of woe, so great had been the torment of the road. But wandering in the summer in the woods of Neldoreth, he came upon Luthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian, at a time of evening under moonrise, as she danced upon the unfading grass in the glades beside Esgalduin. Then all memory of his pain departed from him, and he fell into an enchantment. For Luthien was the most beautiful of all the children of Iluvatar. Blue was her raiment as the unclouded heaven, but her eyes were grey as the starlit evening. Her mantle was sown with golden flowers, but her hair was dark as the shadows of twilight. As the light upon the leaves of trees, as the voice of clear waters, as the stars above the mists of the world, such was her glory and her loveliness, and in her face was a shining light. But she vanished from his sight, and he became dumb as one that is bound under a spell, and he strayed long in the woods, wild and wary as a beast, seeking for her. In his heart he called her Tinuviel, that signifies nightingale, daughter of twilight, in the grey elven tongue, for he knew no other name for her. And he saw her afar as leaves in the winds of autumn, and in winter as a star upon a hill, but a chain was upon his limbs. There came a time near dawn on the eve of spring, and Luthien danced upon a green hill, and suddenly she began to sing. Keen, heart-piercing was her song, as the song of the lark that rises from the gates of night and pours its voice among the dying stars, seeing the sun behind the walls of the world. And the song of Luthien released the bonds of winter, and the frozen waters spoke, and flowers sprang from the cold earth where her feet had passed. Then the spell of silence fell from Beren, and he called to her, crying, Tinuviel, and the woods echoed the name. Then she halted in wonder, and fled no more, and Beren came to her. But as she looked on him, doom fell upon her, and she loved him. Yet she slipped from his arms and vanished from his sight even as the day was breaking. Then Beren lay upon the ground in a swoon, as one slain at once by bliss and grief. And he fell into a sleep, as it were, into an abyss of shadow. And waking, he was cold as stone, and his heart barren and forsaken. And wandering in mind, he groped as one that is stricken with sudden blindness, and seeks with hands to grasp the vanished light. Thus he began the payment of anguish for the fate that was laid on him. And in his fate Luthien was caught, and being immortal, she shared in his mortality, and being free, received his chain. And her anguish was greater than any other the Eldalir has known. Beyond his hope she returned to him, where he sat in darkness, and long ago in the hidden kingdom she laid her hand in his. Thereafter often she came to him, and they went in secret through the woods together from spring to summer, and no others of the children of Iluvatar have had joy so great, though the time was brief. But Daeron the minstrel also loved Luthien, and he espied her meetings with Beren, and betrayed them to Thingol. Then the king was filled with anger, for Luthien he loved above all things, setting her above all the princes of the elves, whereas mortal men he did not even take into his service. Therefore he spoke in grief and amazement to Luthien, but she would reveal nothing, until he swore an oath to her that he would neither slay Beren nor imprison him. But he sent his servants to lay hands on him, and lead him to Menegroth as a malefactor. And Luthien, forestalling them, led Beren herself before the throne of Thingol, as if he were an honored guest. Then Thingol looked upon Beren in scorn and anger. But Melian was silent. "Who are you?" said the king, "that come hither as a thief, and unbidden dare to approach my throne?" But Beren, being filled with dread, for the splendor of Menegroth and the majesty of Thingol were very great, answered nothing. Therefore Luthien spoke and said, "He is Beren, son of Barahir, lord of men, mighty foe of Morgoth, the tale of whose deeds is become a song even among the elves." "Let Beren speak," said Thingol. "What would you here, unhappy mortal? And for what cause have you left your own land to enter this which is forbidden to such as you? Can you show reason why my power should not be laid on you in heavy punishment for your insolence and folly?" Then Beren, looking up, beheld the eyes of Luthien, and his glance went also to the face of Melian. And it seemed to him that words were put into his mouth. Fear left him, and the pride of the eldest house of men returned to him, and he said, "My fate, O king, led me hither, through perils such as few even of the elves would dare. And here I have found what I sought not indeed, but finding I would possess forever. For it is above all gold and silver, and beyond all jewels. Neither rock, nor steel, nor the fires of Morgoth, nor all the powers of the elf kingdoms shall keep from me the treasure that I desire. For Luthien, your daughter, is the fairest of all the children of the world." Then silence fell upon the hall, for those that stood there were astounded and afraid, and they thought that Beren would be slain. But Thingol spoke slowly, saying, "Death you have earned with these words, and death you should find suddenly, had I not sworn an oath in haste, in which I repent, base-born mortal, who in the realm of Morgoth has learned to creep in secret as his spies and thralls." Then Beren answered, "Death you can give me earned or unearned, but the names I will not take from you of base-born, nor spy, nor thrall. By the ring of Felagund that he gave to Barahir my father on the battlefields of the north, my house has not earned such names from any elf, be he king or no." His words were proud, and all eyes looked upon the ring, for he held it now aloft, and the green jewels gleamed there that the Noldor had devised in Valinor. For this ring was like to twin serpents, whose eyes were emeralds, and their heads met beneath a crown of golden flowers, that the one upheld and the other devoured. That was the badge of Finarfin and his house. Then Melian leaned to Thingol's side, and in whispered counsel bade him forego his wrath. "For not by you," she said, "shall Beren be slain, and far and free does his fate lead him in the end, yet it is wound with yours. Take heed." But Thingol looked in silence upon Luthien, and he thought in his heart, "Unhappy men, children of little lords and brief kings, Shall such as these lay hands on you and yet live? Then, breaking the silence, he said, I see the ring, son of Barahir, and I perceive that you are proud and deem yourself mighty. But a father's deeds, even had his service been rendered to me, avail not to win the daughter of Thingol and Melion. See now, I too desire a treasure that is withheld. For rock and steel and the fires of Morgoth keep the jewel that I would possess against all the powers of the elf kingdoms. Yet I hear you say that bonds such as these do not daunt you. Go your way, therefore. Bring to me in your hand a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. And then, if she will, Luthien may set her hand in yours. Then you shall have my jewel. And though the fate of Arda lie within the Silmarils, yet you shall hold me generous. Thus he wrought the doom of Doriath, and was ensnared within the curse of Mandos. And those that heard these words perceived that Thingol would save his oath, and yet send Beren to his death. For they knew that not all the power of the Noldor, before the siege was broken, had availed even to see from afar the shining Silmarils of Feanor. For they were set in the Iron Crown, and treasured in Angband above all wealth, and Balrogs were about them, and countless swords, and strong bars, and unassailable walls, and the dark majesty of Morgoth. But Beren laughed. Ah, for little price, he said, do elven kings sell their daughters, for gems and things made by craft. But if this be your will, Thingol, I will perform it. And when we meet again, my hand shall hold a Silmaril from the Iron Crown, for you have not looked the last upon Beren, son of Barahir. Then he looked in the eyes of Melian, who spoke not, and he bade farewell to Luthien to Nuvia. And bowing before Thingol and Melian, he put aside the guards about him, and departed from Menegroth alone. Then at last Melian spoke, and she said to Thingol, O king, you have devised cunning counsel, but if my eyes have not lost their sight, it is ill for you whether Beren fail in his errand or achieve it. For you have doomed either your daughter or yourself, and now is Doriath drawn within the fate of a mightier realm. But Thingol answered, I sell not to elves or men those whom I love and cherish above all treasure. And if there were hope or fear that Beren should come ever back alive to Menegroth, he should not have looked again upon the light of heaven, though I had sworn it. But Luthien was silent, and from that hour she sang not again in Doriath. A brooding silence fell upon the woods, and the shadows lengthened in the kingdom of Thingol. It is told in the Lay of Leithian that Beren passed through Doriath unhindered, and came at length to the region of the Twilight Meres and the fens of Sirion. And leaving Thingol's land, he climbed the hills above the falls of Sirion, where the river plunged underground with great noise. Thence he looked westward, and through the mist and rains that lay upon the hills, he saw Talath Dirnan, the guarded plain, stretching between Sirion and Narog. And beyond, he descried afar the highlands of Power en Faroth, that rose above Nargothrond, and being destitute without hope or counsel, he turned his feet thither. Upon all that plain, the elves of Nargothrond kept unceasing watch, and every hill upon its borders was crowned with hidden towers, and through all its woods and fields archers reigned secretly and with great craft. Their arrows were sure and deadly, and nothing crept there against their will. Therefore, ere Beren had come far upon his road, they were aware of him, and his death was nigh. But knowing his danger, he held ever aloft the ring of Felagund, and though he saw no living thing, because of the stealth of the hunters, he felt that he was watched, and he cried often aloud, I am Beren, son of Barahir, friend of Felagund. Take me to the king. Therefore the hunters slew him not, but assembling, they waylaid him and commanded him to halt. But seeing the ring, they bowed before him, though he was in evil plight, wild and wayworn. And they led him northward and westward, going by night, lest their paths should be revealed. For at that time there was no ford or bridge over the torrent of Narog before the gates of Nargothrond. But further to the north, where Ginglith joined Narog, the flood was less, and crossing there and turning again southward, the elves led Beren under the light of the moon to the dark gates of their hidden halls. Thus Beren came before King Finrod Felagund, and Felagund knew him, needing no ring to remind him of the kin of Beor and of Barahir. Behind closed doors they sat, and Beren told of the death of Barahir and of all that had befallen him in Doriath, and he wept, recalling Luthien and their joy together. But Felagund heard his tale in wonder and disquiet, and he knew that the oath he had sworn was come upon him for his death, as long before he had foretold to Galadriel. He spoke then to Beren in heaviness of heart. It is plain that Thingol desires your death, but it seems that this doom goes beyond his purpose, and that the oath of Feanor is again at work. For the Silmarils are cursed with an oath of hatred, and he that even names them in desire moves a great power from slumber. And the sons of Feanor would lay all the elf kingdoms in ruin, rather than suffer any other than themselves to win or possess a Silmaril, for the oath drives them. And now Celegorm and Curufin are dwelling in my halls, and though I, Finarfin's son, am king, they have won a strong power in the realm, and lead many of their own people. They have shown friendship to me in every need, but I fear that they will show neither love nor mercy to you if your quest be told. Yet my own oath holds, and thus we are all ensnared. Then King Felagund spoke before his people, recalling the deeds of Barahir and his vow, and he declared that it was laid upon him to aid the son of Barahir in his need, and he sought the help of his chieftains. Then Celegorm arose amid the throng, and drawing his sword he cried, "Be he friend or foe, whether demon of Morgoth or elf or child of men, or any other living thing in Arda, neither law, nor love, nor league of hell, nor might of the Valar, nor any power of wizardry, shall defend him from the pursuing hate of Feanor's sons, if he take or find the Silmaril and keep it. For the Silmarils we alone claim, until the world ends." Many other words he spoke, as potent as were long before in Tirion the words of his father that first inflamed the Noldor to rebellion. And after Celegorm, Curufin spoke, more softly, but with no less power, conjuring in the minds of the elves a vision of war and the ruin of Nargothrond. So great a fear did he set in their hearts, that never after until the time of Turin would any elf of that realm go into open battle. But with stealth and ambush, with wizardry and venomed dart, they pursued all strangers, forgetting the bonds of kinship. Thus they fell from the valor and freedom of the elves of old, and their land was darkened. And now they murmured that Finarfin's son was not as a Valar to command them, and they turned their faces from him. But the curse of Mandos came upon the brothers, and dark thoughts arose in their hearts, thinking to send forth Felagund alone to his death, and to usurp, it might be, the throne of Nargothrond, for they were of the eldest line of the princes of the Noldor. And Felagund, seeing that he was forsaken, took from his head the silver crown of Nargothrond, and cast it at his feet, saying, "Your oaths of faith to me you may break, but I must hold my bond. Yet if there be any on whom the shadow of our curse has not yet fallen, I should find at least a few to follow me, and should not go hence as a beggar that is thrust from the gates." There were 10 that stood by him, and the chief of them, who was named Edrahil, stooping, lifted the crown, and asked that it be given to a steward until Felagund's return. "For you remain my king and theirs," he said, "whatever betide." Then Felagund gave the crown of Nargothrond to Orodreth his brother to govern in his stead, and Celegorm and Curufin said nothing, but they smiled and went from the halls. On an evening of autumn, Felagund and Beren set out from Nargothrond with their 10 companions, and they journeyed beside Narog to his source in the falls of Ivlin. Beneath the shadowy mountains they came upon a company of orcs, and slew them all in their camp by night, and they took their gear and their weapons. By the arts of Felagund, their own forms and faces were changed into the likeness of orcs, and thus disguised, they came far upon their northward road, and ventured into the western pass between Ered-Wethrin and the highlands of Dawr Nufuin. But Sauron in his tower was ware of them, and doubt took him. For they went in haste, and stayed not to report their deeds, as were commanded to all the servants of Morgoth that passed that way. Therefore he sent to waylay them, and bring them before him. Thus befell the contest of Sauron and Felagund, which is renowned. For Felagund strove with Sauron in songs of power, and the power of the king was very great. But Sauron held the mastery, as is told in the Lay of Leithian. He chanted a song of wizardry, of piercing opening, of treachery, revealing, uncovering, betraying. Then sudden Felagund there swaying, sang in answer a song of staying, resisting, battling against power, of secrets kept, strength like a tower, and trust unbroken, freedom, escape, of changing and of shifting shape, of snares eluded, broken traps, the prison opening, the chain that snaps. Backwards and forwards swayed their song, reeling and foundering as ever more strong the chanting swelled. Felagund fought, and all the magic and might he brought of Elveness into his words. Softly in the gloom they heard the birds, singing afar in Nargothrond, the sighing of the sea beyond, beyond the western world on sand of pearls in Elven land. Then the gloom gathered, darkness growing, in Valinor the red blood flowing. Beside the sea where the Noldor slew the foam riders and stealing drew their white ships with their white sails from lamplit havens. The wind wails, the wolf howls, the ravens flee, the ice mutters in the mouths of the sea. The captives sad in Angband mourn, thunder rumbles, the fires burn, and Finrod fell before the throne. Then Sauron stripped from them their disguise, and they stood before him naked and afraid. But though their kinds were revealed, Sauron could not discover their names or their purposes. He cast them, therefore, into a deep pit, dark and silent, and threatened to slay them cruelly, unless one would betray the truth to him. From time to time, they saw two eyes kindled in the dark, and a werewolf devoured one of the companions, but none betrayed their lord. In the time when Sauron cast Beren into the pit, a weight of horror came upon Lúthien's heart. And going to Melian for counsel, she learned that Beren lay in the dungeons of Tol in Garoth, without hope of rescue. Then Lúthien, perceiving that no help would come from any other on earth, resolved to fly from Doriath and come herself to him. But she sought the aid of Daeron, and he betrayed her purpose to the king. Then Thingol was filled with fear and wonder, and because he would not deprive Lúthien of the lights of heaven, lest she fail and fade, and yet would restrain her, he caused a house to be built from which she should not escape. Not far from the gates of Menigruth stood the greatest of all the trees in the forest of Neldoreth, and that was a beech forest, and the northern half of the kingdom. This mighty beech was named Hirillorn, and it had 3 trunks, equal in girth, smooth in rind, and exceeding tall. No branches grew from them for a great height above the ground. Far aloft, between the shafts of Hirillorn, a wooden house was built, and there Lúthien was made to dwell, and the ladders were taken away and guarded, save only when the servants of Thingol brought her such things as she needed. It is told in the Lay of Leithian how she escaped from the house in Hirillorn, for she put forth her arts of enchantment, and caused her hair to grow to great length, and of it she wove a dark robe that wrapped her beauty like a shadow, and it was laden with a spell of sleep. Of the strands that remained, she twined a rope, and she let it down from her window, and as the end swayed above the guards that sat beneath the tree, they fell into a deep slumber. Then Lúthien climbed from her prison, and shrouded in her shadowy cloak, she escaped from all eyes, and vanished out of Doriath. It chanced that Celagorm and Curufin went on a hunt through the guarded plain, and this they did because Sauron, being filled with suspicion, sent forth many wolves into the Elflands. Therefore they took their hounds and rode forth, and they thought that ere they returned, they might also hear tidings concerning King Felagund. Now the chief of the wolfhounds that followed Celegorm was named Huan. He was not born in Middle-earth, but came from the Blessed Realm. For Orome had given him to Celegorm long ago in Valinor, and there he had followed the horn of his master before evil came. Huan followed Celegorm into exile, and was faithful. And thus he too came under the doom of woe set upon the Noldor. And it was decreed that he should meet death, but not until he encountered the mightiest wolf that would ever walk the world. Huan it was that found Luthien flying like a shadow surprised by the daylight under the trees, when Celegorm and Curufin rested a while near to the western eaves of Doriath. For nothing could escape the sight and scent of Huan, nor could any enchantment stay him, and he slept not, neither by night nor day. He brought her to Celegorm, and Luthien, learning that he was a prince of the Noldor and a foe of Morgoth, was glad, and she declared herself, casting aside her cloak. So great was her sudden beauty revealed beneath the sun, that Celegorm became enamored of her. But he spoke her fair, and promised that she should find help in her need, if she returned with him now to Nargothrond. By no sign did he reveal that he knew already of Beren and the quest, of which she told, nor that it was a matter which touched him near. Thus they broke off the hunt, and returned to Nargothrond, and Luthien was betrayed. For they held her fast, and took away her cloak, and she was not permitted to pass the gates, or to speak with any save the brothers Celegorm and Curufin. For now, believing that Beren and Felagund were prisoners beyond hope of aid, they purposed to let the king perish, and to keep Luthien, and force Thingol to give her hand to Celegorm. Thus they would advance their power, and become the mightiest of the princes of the Noldor. And they did not purpose to seek the Silmarils by craft or war, or to suffer any others to do so, until they had all the might of the elf kingdoms under their hands. Orodreth had no power to withstand them, for they swayed the hearts of the people of Nargothrond, and Celegorm sent messengers to Thingol, urging his suit. But Huan the Hound was true of heart, and the love of Luthien had fallen upon him in the first hour of their meeting, and he grieved at her captivity. Therefore he came often to her chamber, and at night he lay before her door, for he felt that evil had come to Nargothrond. Luthien spoke often to Huan in her loneliness, telling of Beren, who was the friend of all birds and beasts that did not serve Morgoth. And Huan understood all that was said, for he comprehended the speech of all things with voice, but it was permitted to him thrice only ere his death to speak with words. Now Huan devised a plan for the aid of Luthien, and coming at a time of night, he brought her cloak, and for the first time he spoke, giving her counsel. Then he led her by secret ways out of Nargothrond, and they fled north together, and he humbled his pride, and suffered her to ride upon him in the fashion of a steed, even as the orcs did at times upon great wolves. Thus they made great speed, for Huan was swift and tireless. In the pits of Sauron, Beren and Felagund lay, and all their companions were now dead. But Sauron purposed to keep Felagund to the last, for he perceived that he was a Noldo of great might and wisdom, and he deemed that in him lay the secret of their errand. But when the wolf came for Beren, Felagund put forth all his power, and burst his bonds, and he wrestled with the werewolf, and slew it with his hands and teeth. Yet he himself was wounded to the death. Then he spoke to Beren, saying, I go now to my long rest in the timeless halls beyond the seas and the mountains of Aman. It will be long ere I am seen among the Noldor again, and it may be that we shall not meet a second time in death or life, for the fates of our kindreds are apart. Farewell. He died then in the dark, in Tol in Garoth, whose great tower he himself had built. Thus King Finrod Felagund, fairest and most beloved of the house of Finwë, redeemed his oath. But Beren mourned beside him in despair. In that hour, Luthien came, and standing upon the bridge that led to Sauron's Isle, she sang a song that no walls of stone could hinder. Beren heard, and he thought that he dreamed, for the stars shone above him, and in the trees nightingales were singing. And in answer he sang a song of challenge that he had made in praise of the 7 stars, the sickle of the Valar that Varda hung above the north as a sign for the fall of Morgoth. Then all strength left him, and he fell down into darkness. But Luthien heard his answering voice, and she sang then a song of greater power. The wolves howled, and the isle trembled. Sauron stood in the high tower, wrapped in his black thought. But he smiled, hearing her voice, for he knew that it was the daughter of Melian. The fame of the beauty of Luthien, and the wonder of her song, had long gone forth from Doriath. And he thought to make her captive, and hand her over to the power of Morgoth, for his reward would be great. Therefore he sent a wolf to the bridge, but Huan slew it silently. Still Sauron sent others one by one. One by one, Huan took them by the throat and slew them. Then Sauron sent Draugluin, a dread beast, old and evil, lord and sire of the werewolves of Angband. His might was great, and the battle of Huan and Draugluin was long and fierce. Yet at length Draugluin escaped, and fleeing back into the tower, he died before Sauron's feet. And as he died, he told his master, "Huan is there." Now Sauron knew well, as did all in that land, the fate that was decreed for the Hound of Valinor. And it came into his thought that he himself would accomplish it. Therefore he took upon himself the form of a werewolf, and made himself the mightiest that had yet walked the world. And he came forth to win the passage of the bridge. So great was the horror of his approach that Huan leapt aside. Then Sauron sprang upon Luthien, and she swooned before the menace of the fell spirit in his eyes and the foul vapor of his breath. But even as he came, falling, she cast a fold of her dark cloak before his eyes, and he stumbled, for a fleeting drowsiness came upon him. Then Huan sprang. There befell the battle of Huan and Wolf Sauron, and the howls and baying echoed in the hills, and the watchers on the walls of Eredwethren across the valley heard it afar and were dismayed. But no wizardry nor spell, neither fang nor venom, nor devil's art, nor beast strength could overthrow Huan of Valinor. And he took his foe by the throat and pinned him down. Then Sauron shifted shape, from wolf to serpent, and from monster to his own accustomed